This time Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special celebrating International Women's Day, the month of March. With me today is a fantastic young lady I got to meet on Twitter through the socials and in subsequent Chris Netto happy hours, Sarabeth Mullins. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks to be here, Tim. It's nice to talk to someone.
In English, no less. And we'll
English,
explain that.
Yes.
Sarabeth actually is a PhD student, a doctoral student in acoustics at the Sorbonne University in Paris, France. So there's all kinds of things with that I'm jealous of, not the least of which is the PhD part, but also the Paris part. And that's why we joke about talking to someone in English. So you don't have a French accent.
No, I do not.
How'd you get here? And I don't mean France, obviously, but you know, the overarching industry-wide favorite question is, how did you get involved in the AV industry, Sarabeth?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think there's as many answers to the question as there are people working in AV. I guess I had a bit of a winding road to get into it. I'm a doctoral student, like you said. I'm working on virtual acoustic models and creating them for historic inquiry. But I actually started out as a music major. So I have a Bachelor of Music in Composition, make some pretty awesome party tricks with sick bird noises on woodwinds. During my undergrad, I found an interest in a lot of the technical systems that we were using as a music composition department, which led me to start interning with the technology services at Affiliated Engineers Northwest office in Seattle, where I'm from originally. After college, I was able to snag a really great internship with the Acoustics group at the Stantec Consulting Services, also based in Seattle. Okay. I worked there for a year, and after a year was promoted from intern to an actual acoustic consultant. And while I was there, I did a lot of work with acoustic modeling software. So mainly CAT and EASE. I'm sure you're familiar with that one. Started thinking about doing continuing education, realized I had a large interest in more of the the why of sound than the how of sound. I learned a lot about how to set up integrated systems, or, how to make sure that we were passing signal from the correct places, how to solve problems. But I didn't really understand the why of why does sound behave the way it does? Why do we do things the way we do them? So I chose a degree in acoustics and music technology, and was able to do my master's thesis in acoustic modeling, through line there. And I guess the final step to where I'm now is that my program was ending, and I was starting to look for new jobs for what to do after the master's school. That was actually about a year ago today, and I'm sure we're all unfortunately aware of what was going on a year ago today. Yeah. The job market, which had been really great, lots of opportunities, it disappeared overnight, especially for developing professionals with sort of my level of experience, 2 to 4 years worth of experience in the industry. So I was starting to look elsewhere, find as many options as I could. I found this listing for a thesis in France. Figured, it matches my interests, it matches my skill set. I'll throw my hat in the ring, see if anything happens. And kind of shockingly, something happened with that. So I guess that's the long and short of it, a winding road. But
it's
here I am.
Yeah, it's a fascinating winding road. And we're not going to get into the particulars of how you went from the Northwest United States into France during a pandemic when both countries were locked down. Not going to get into that. Although if you follow Sarabeth on either Instagram or Twitter, several pictures of her in full PPE. So like, she's being very safe as she goes to work to and from every day. I want to pick on something though really quickly because I'm fascinating and I have no idea what this means.
Yeah.
Acoustic modeling for historic inquiry.
Yeah.
What is that? I think I know, but help me out here.
So the subject of the dissertation specifically is studying the acoustic heritage of Notre Dame de Paris, the cathedral that burnt in 2019. And the methodology that we're using is generating virtual models that you can interact with real time in such a way as to understand, for instance, what it might have been like to be a woman worshiping in the cathedral in, say, the 11th or 12th century. So
good night. Okay. Now I'm even more. So really quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I have been to Paris once. I've been to a service at Notre Dame. It was an international service. Yeah, I'm not Catholic, but it was just fascinating.
Right.
And one thing I learned about that is that there has been a religious building, a Catholic building, a church of some sort for the last 1,000 years there.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that you're doing that is even immensely even more fascinating.
I believe in either 2013 or 2015, it's celebrated its 850th anniversary of existence. Yeah. So
good night.
Old building.
Old building. So let's talk about, you going from music, which is a common, underlying theory for AV professionals, through consulting, right? There's not a lot of women in consulting.
No.
There's not a lot of women in acoustics, to be frank. So what are some of the challenges you faced being a woman and quite frankly, being a young woman in a consulting field and also in the field of acoustics?
Right. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. Chris Netto had a women's takeover of his AV in the AM a few weeks ago, and it's certainly been causing a lot of reflection on my part. I think the simplest way I could put it is that I've had to deal with an awful lot of assumptions about my capabilities that have been made sort of purely based on my appearance and my gender. So, I mean, we're talking about everything as small and insignificant as, say, managers at some of my previous technician jobs who thought I didn't know how to run cable or didn't know how to gaff things properly. Or sabotaging some of my gigs because they took it a bit personally that I sort of knew what I was doing. From that sort of minor level of inconvenience to what I might describe as a bit of a brick wall when it comes to breaking into consulting, there is really no easy way to describe the sort of outsider effect that you experience as a young woman going to trade shows like Infocom or AES or other sort of large industry conferences and events. My experience on trade room floors, show floors has been, ignored at booths, dismissed when I try to ask technical questions. In attempting to network at networking events, if I don't know anyone previously, you're sort of being iced out of any existing conversations. It's just like this institutional force pressing out against anyone who might be trying to get on the inside of the industry. I will admit that I'm a bit petty. I do keep a mental list of some of the worst offenders. Both individuals and sometimes companies if it's a company recurring issue. Because, in general, you can sort of overlook one or two instances of this pushback against your presence. But when it becomes a recurring issue, you really begin to wonder, are these people I want to continue to do business with in the future? If they're not willing to accept my presence and value it, maybe that should be a data point for any decisions going into the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess to sort of sum it up, a bit of condescension and from some people, a sort of inability or refusal to take me and my contributions seriously. Yeah.
Explain to someone who has never had this, and I said this last month when we were interviewing folks for Black History Month. I will say it again. I understand who I am and where I am, right, and what I am. I am a straight white guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Closer beyond the middle-aged part, but that's beyond as a whole other issue.
I think it's a state of mind, Tim.
Oh,
Middle age is just a
then
state
I am
of mind.
ancient. You can do acoustic modeling in my historic head. What does dismissing mean? What does it mean to you? What does it look like? And I asked this, having asked this before to other folks as well, and not just women and not just people of color. Actually, I had a couple of conversations with a gentleman, a dear friend of mine, who went from manufacturing to end user, and his first trade show after having that transition was dismissed. And this is someone who spent 20 years on the manufacturing side. And, you know, again, this wasn't a gender thing. This wasn't a race thing. It was just where you are, your position in the industry. So tell some folks if they haven't experienced that, like, what does dismiss look like?
I mean, this one's a perpetual, reoccurring thread. I think, as with many introverts, I tend to take a few moments to think about questions that I'm going to ask when I visit a vendor booth or am networking with a new company and want to know more about them. You know, I don't want to ask the question that's been asked 1,000 times already that day. I want to ask something that can only be answered by someone in person. So I'll sit back, I'll take a second, formulate my question, and make sure it goes specific to exactly the issue that I'd like to know. And rather than having that question addressed as it is, that is to the point, I'll get like this sort of generic, oh, well, you probably don't know much about anything sort of answer. You know, I'm asking a question on, shall we say, level 4 or 5, and they're answering the question as if it's on level 1 or 2. A sort of speaking down to me, a sort of assumption that whatever question I might ask is like, it only sounds smart, I guess, might be the right way to put it. Yeah. Technical questions being redirected constantly to like a sales brochure rather than, you know, the engineer continuing to engage with me in person. That's a fun runaround to get a few times. I think also there's been multiple instances, and this is consulting specific, you know, where I've shown up as the designer. Certainly not the most senior AV person in the room, but the one who's, shall we say, in the weeds most of the time, shown up to meetings, and rather than taking my answers for what they are and addressing continuing questions to me, asking the more senior man in the room those technical questions that he constantly has to refer to me to answer, because, you know, as the supervisor, as a higher level consultant, his job is to QA QC my work, not to do my work for me.
Yes.
Yes, but that sort of, shall we say, glossing over the areas in which I have expertise and assuming that someone else has it instead is, I think, those are a few examples of the most glaringly obvious forms of dismissal I've experienced.
So let's fast forward this a bit to the end of your career, and we mentioned the fact that you are, you know, you're towards the beginning. You know, it takes a couple of years to get to the doctoral part, right. But still, you know, when you retire, when you decide to you know, exit this industry many years from now, what do you want to see have changed, and what do you want to have done to change it?
Okay, well, there's a very glaringly obvious analogy that comes to mind, a seat at the table. I think, unfortunately, that trope is accurate. What I would like to see is a bigger table. I look at some of the work that the AVIXA Foundation is doing to create scholarships for diverse students entering the field, partnering with more organizations for high schoolers, young adults to find passion for the industry, to try to open the doors more to people from a variety of backgrounds. And I would like to see the industry continue in that fashion. You know, I like to joke with my dad, who's also an AV professional, that what I see a lot of in AV is that it's a whole bunch of guys who got a taste for sound back in the 60s and 70s, you know, going to rock shows, being a roadie, whatever, you know, they get their in and they've continued to follow their passion. And, you know, now they're a little less rough around the edges. Now we talk about deliverables rather than gigs, but there was this path for multiple people to find a passion and develop it. And I think when I retire, what I'd like to see is more paths into that passion, more willingness for people on the inside of the industry to extend that initial trust, that initial mentorship, that initial, you know, handshake to people who are sniffing around the outsides thinking, you know, what's up with this sound thing? What's up with this networking thing? And say, like, come in, the water's great. And when you're ready to swim, you know, we're going to be like cheering for you. That's what I'd like to see. So
that is incredible. That is a wonderful way to end. Sarabeth Mullins, if somebody wants to connect with you and follow along as your journey towards doctorate, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. I suppose that's the most professional of my online presences. It's just Sarabeth Mullins. You can also find me on Twitter, again, Sarabeth Mullins. If we connect real well on Twitter or LinkedIn, I might consider sharing my personal Instagram account, which is mostly pictures of daily life in Paris. But if you're looking to get in touch, sarabethmullins@gmail.com is a great way to reach me. So
very good, Sarabeth Mullins, and I will be following you because you are, again, remarkable, and looking forward to all the incredible things you're gonna accomplish. So thank you so much. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv, and follow along as we highlight other incredible women during International Women's Month for International Women's Day. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.